To conclude, one topic I come back to often, alternate side parking. So we've had alternate side parking off for much of the time of this crisis. We do need to bring it back when it's important to clean up some more. So we're going to bring it back for next week. And I want to emphasize, because there's been some confusion and we're really going to work hard to get this right for people. For folks who have alternate side parking, so it'll be on next week, if you typically just move your car once a week on your side of the street, then just do as you would normally do with alternate side parking. If you're on one of those streets with multiple times a week, and you see the image on your screen, if you're on the street with multiple times a week, we're trying to move off that going forward. In that instance, just move it on the last day indicated on the sign on your side of the street. Remember, your side of the street is what matters, and the sign on your side of the street. So as you see on the visual, ignore the first day, go to the last day, and that's the one time we need you to move your car during the week when alternate side is in effect. And we're going to do a lot more to explain that to the people of the city, and particularly folks on those blocks going forward. Okay, let's do our indicators. First, number one, daily number of people admitted to hospitals for suspected COVID-19, threshold of 200. Today's report, 75 patients. Number two, daily number of people in health and hospitals ICUs, threshold 375. Today's report, 314 patients. And people tested citywide, number three, tested citywide positive for COVID-19. Threshold is 15%. Once again today, 2%, a very good number. Really striking consistency, and that is a credit to all of you. Few words in Spanish. Nuestra ciudad ha estado trabajando duro para evitar propagar al virus. Y lo estamos logrando. Este lunes, la ciudad de Nueva York podrá comenzar la cuarta fase del reinicio. En esta fase, regresaron muchas actividades al aire libre, incluyendo el béisbol. Vamos a seguir trabajando para que los neoyorquinos puedan regresar a sus empleos y disfrutar el verano también. Yes, Commissioner, baseball sounds the same in Spanish. That's right. You can say that. Everybody, we will now turn to questions from our colleagues in the media, and please let me know the name and outlet of each journalist.
Hi all, just a reminder that we have with us today Police Commissioner Shea, Transportation Commissioner Trottenberg, Small Business Commissioner Doris, and Senior Advisor Dr. Varma. With that, I'll start with Marcia from CBS.
Mr. Mayor, I wondered if I could ask you and the police commissioner about the fact that a man who was caught on video and arrested for attacking Chief Monahan and 3 police officers was released without bail. I wonder how you feel about that and what message it sends to people who might feel that it's open season and they can attack cops at will.
Yeah, Marcia, I am very unhappy about that, and it does not make sense to me. It really doesn't. First of all, Terry Monahan's a friend of mine. I have great respect for him, and he's out there every day trying to protect everyone in the city. And to see someone assault him, chief of department, absolutely unacceptable. Assaulting any police officer, absolutely unacceptable. And there needs to be consequences. And that's where I say we need our court system up and running. But also in a case like this, it does not make sense to me. If you assault a police officer, you're assaulting all of us. And there needs to be clear consequences. So that just doesn't make sense to me. Commissioner, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, Marcia, I think you know my answer to that. I mean, it's very frustrating. I think the world at times seems like it's upside down. I mean, we got to do better than that. But what I said in an interview yesterday was I was at I stopped in and spent quite a bit of time yesterday at a CompStat meeting, Brooklyn violence. And who was running the meeting and who was sitting right behind him? It was the chief that was assaulted and the lieutenant that was assaulted. Both went to the hospital, treated, and back to work the next day, talking about how to keep New Yorkers safe. So, you know, that's what I'll pull out of that incident. Obviously, we got to do better as a society, and there needs to be consequences for people that just have no regard for laws.
Go ahead, Marcia.
Mr. Mayor, my second question has to do with your restaurant program, your open streets and open restaurant program. I know you're expanding it, but we've been getting complaints from a number of restaurant owners who say they've been getting hit with compliance notifications, threats of fines or penalties, and they're not getting enough direction from DOT on how to fix the issues. Is there anything you can do to provide better guidance and anything you can do to help these restaurants who desperately need to stay open?
Absolutely, Marcia. Look, I've talked to a lot of restaurant owners. I understand their concerns, and we're acting on it right now. We don't want to fine anyone in the restaurant community, any small business. We don't want to ever see a restaurant that gets into this program not succeed. We want to help them succeed. So, Marcia, what happened is, look, the original guidance, which was done really with a sense of urgency, and you remember, we did something very unusual. We let people self-certify. It took like 5 minutes to do the form, and you were up and running. The fact is, we learned some things in the process about areas where we had to do a little bit better on safety. And we came back and said, hey guys, we have to tighten up these pieces. And we're working with those restaurants to do it. It's not contentious, it's cooperative. But the message I've sent to DOT and all our agencies is help restaurants get to a positive solution. Now, if a restaurant bluntly refuses, which I don't think is the case hardly ever, that's a different matter. But what I've heard is restaurant owners want to get it right, the agencies want to get it right, they're communicating more and more, and that we're going to resolve things. So any restaurant owner that is having a problem, that you don't feel you're getting the right cooperation, please call 311. We'll connect you with Department of Transportation, Small Business Services, the folks who can work with you to resolve the problem, because we want to get these problems fixed.
Next, we have Henry from Bloomberg.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. How are you today?
Good, Henry. How you doing?
Okay. I wanted to ask you about the governor's order that people can't go up to a bar, an open air bar, and just get a drink without dining. A lot of the science says that actually eating spreads the virus more readily than drinking. I don't want to, start a fight between you and the governor, but when you're opening these restaurants and you want to increase, the action, will this hinder the growth of these jobs?
Look, Henry, first of all, I respect the state's decisions in the middle of this crisis. And in terms of what impact it might have on jobs, I think it's important that we hear from the restaurant community on that. Obviously, that is a concern. But what I want to emphasize is, overwhelmingly, restaurants and bars in New York City have been in compliance. We've been out there constantly with a variety of agencies, particularly the Sheriff's Office that's done great work here, and constantly documented the levels of compliance, which are very, very high. Sometimes things have to be corrected, but people tend to follow the instructions quickly, whether it's customers or the restaurant and bar owners. So we have not seen a really profound problem with compliance here. There's always some images that raise concerns, but if you really look at the facts and the details, it's quite clear the people in New York City take this virus very, very seriously, and the people who own the businesses do too. And there's a good article in Politico today that goes into some of those details about the fact that New Yorkers really have stayed in compliance. So, look, respect the state's decisions, but I want to make really clear how much I appreciate that people have done the hard work on the ground to open these businesses and try and make them work the right way.
Henry, do you have
I do have another question, and it's a completely separate topic. I'm wondering why the concept of the commuter tax has completely disappeared from your discourse and anyone else's discourse when the city is facing a fiscal crisis.
It's a very fair question, Henry. Look, the commuter tax was there for a long time. It was fair. It was really about asking people who came in and used the services of this city to help contribute to them. But I also understand the really challenging politics in Albany. I think the huge mistake was ever letting it go away. It's a very hard thing to get back. But what I think is gaining traction as an alternative to address the state and city fiscal crises, like deep, deep crises that can only be compared to the 1970s, is the idea of taxes on the wealthy. I mean, wealthy people are doing very, very well despite this crisis, where working people are suffering in an unprecedented manner. You have to go back generations to find a time where so many working people were unemployed and suffering so deeply. So I think it is the right time to ask more of those among us who have done very, very well.
Next, we have Michael from the Daily News.
Morning, Mr. Mayor. How you doing?
How you doing, man?
I'm good. Two questions. The first one, yesterday, and I think today you may have said the same thing. You described the incident involving Terry Monahan as unacceptable. And, you know, we've seen other kind of violent incidents stem out of this Occupy City Hall encampment. You know, a reporter attacked but with a 2x4. There were some TV reporters who were also attacked. So my question is, at what point is it unacceptable enough that the city actually refuses to accept it and has the police go in and disperse the encampment?
Michael, first of all, we look at each incident, and I don't have all the specifics about the individuals involved. I don't know if they were associated with one group or another. I don't tend to think of people all in one, fell swoop. I want to know what's happened in each individual incident. As we've gone through months of real concerns and protests being raised around the city, vast majority of people have been peaceful. There's a few who have chosen violence, and that will never be accepted. But to the question of what's going on with that particular site, I've been really clear. We respect freedom of speech, but we must see safety, and we have to protect safety at the same time, and we're always striking that balance, and I'm always listening to the NYPD's assessment of how best to do that.
Michael, do you have
Thank
another?
you.
Do you have another
Yeah,
question?
one more. Yeah, this is from our folks at the Shack for Commissioner Shea. What's the plan to replace the anti-crime unit? Will there be another unit formed that's somewhat analogous to it?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So when you look at the state of New York City right now, the violent uptick, the level of arrests made, I think you have to look at all of this together. When you look at the amount of guns that are seized, but one that's not often talked about is what happens after the fact and the prosecution of those guns and the state of this court system right now. We look at that not in pieces, we look at it in its entirety. When we make decisions about deployment, when we make decisions about strategically how do we keep New Yorkers safe. So the answer to your question is we think about it all. It is a fluid situation, but what we need help with right now, and I want to look forward, not back, but all things are connected here. We, just in the last year and a half, we have about 2,000 open gun cases. Half of them are indicted. We need the price of carrying an illegal firearm in New York City to be felt. We don't necessarily need more gun arrests. We need the people that are caught to be prosecuted fully. And then we need the court systems open to get them off the street as quickly as possible. So when we have all those things working, that's a huge piece of this equation. But we are constantly evaluating how we deploy, how we do it smarter, and how we do it in a way that when we make gun arrests, they get prosecuted fully.
I just want to add and bring back one piece here, Michael. Again, I think sometimes when there's events swirling around, there's assumptions made. And if you listen carefully to what the commissioner's been saying over recent weeks, he is always looking at the big picture. It's one of the things I appreciate deeply about him. And that decision around the anti-crime unit was not just based on current events. It's something the commissioner had been thinking about for a variety of reasons for a long time. And Commissioner, I think if you would add for a moment, I think it's important for the people of the city just to understand a little more of the context of what you thought could be achieved going forward with a different approach.
Yeah, I absolutely think, and I said this publicly, I think that the manner in which we get guns off the street will continue. It has to continue, but it has to be done in a way that also builds trust with the community, number one. Number two, when we have a situation where repeatedly, maybe we'll start inviting you to some of these CompStat meetings, or Chief LaPetri can go through this in detail with you. When we have situations, I heard many of them yesterday, where we have individuals involved in current violence throughout this city, and then when you look at their rap sheet, they have 3, 4, 5 prior gun arrests. You just have to stop and shake your head and say, what is going on? There's got to be a different way to do this in terms of getting guns off the street, but doing it in a way that builds trust with the community, and also getting people prosecuted. So this is the big picture that we look at. And again, when you look at the state of populations of incarcerated individuals, and you tie it with COVID, the anti-crime is a piece of this, but it is a small piece of what's going on. The level of activity in the NYPD, for a number of reasons, to include protests, COVID, and other factors, goes well beyond just a small number of officers deployed to anti-crime.
Thank you.
Next, we have Juliet from 1010 Wins.
Oh, hi, good morning, all. So, Commissioner, could you expound on that? You say you want to get guns off the street and build trust in the community, with the community. So how do you go about that?
Well, we do it. I think if you look just even this week, we're making gun arrests, Juliet. It starts with proper deployment. It continues with relentless follow-up, detailed investigations, using technology, working with the community. And you've heard me, we have pioneered in this city, Juliet, precision policing. And sometimes there's too many arrests, and sometimes there's not enough arrests, and that's a fluid state. But what is most important in that equation is getting the most out of the arrests that you make, and being precise about where violence is happening, who's committing it, and getting people off the street as quickly as possible that are committing violence and really terrorizing neighborhoods in New York City. And that works best when we have everything working together. Cops, community, prosecutors, laws, everything.
Go ahead, Juliet.
Yes, thank you. And Mr. Mayor, this question is for you. Does there come a point when you, as the mayor, just put your foot down and say, the violence has to stop? We have a 1-year-old who was shot. We have a young man with a great future who was shot by indiscriminate gun violence. We're hearing this from community leaders. We hear this from police officials. But where is your message, a very forceful message to say this is enough?
Juliet, I've said it so many times, and I'll say it again. The violence has to stop. It is not acceptable, and we're going to beat it back. I've really made that clear in Bed-Stuy when I went to visit with the mom and the grandma of DeVell, and in so many other locations. But again, we have to all decide we're going to do this together. And I would say to all of you who report the news, please, when all of us make clear that we are resolute in fighting back violence and that we are engaging communities to do it, because the police cannot do it alone, please make sure that message gets through too. I stood with community members in Harlem last Saturday night, and their passion was clear. They were not going to accept violence in their community. They were putting themselves out there with the Occupy the Corners effort. And this is what we have been devoted to for years. We have driven down crime steadily in this city until we reach this horrible situation in recent months. But nonetheless, we're going to beat it back again. So not only is it not acceptable to have violence in our city, we will defeat it.
Next, we have Gloria from New York One.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, and for the commissioner as well. The police department put out the most updated data this morning showing a drop in arrest across several different categories in the last couple of weeks. So I wondered if both you and the commissioner can speak to that. As we are seeing this increase in violence, we're also seeing this massive drop in arrest. So I guess first, if you could speak to the numbers, what they're not small percentages.
Sure, but it is a matter of weeks, so I want to put this in perspective, and the commissioner will speak to it. Gloria, we as a city have gone through so many absolutely unpredictable, extraordinary, unprecedented realities in just a few months. We've got to keep that front and center in our thinking. Despite all that, overall index crime is still down this year compared to last year. The NYPD continues, as you just heard from the commissioner, to be out there vigorously going after those who perpetrate the violence. But the last weeks have come with so many different challenges, and there's had to be some regrouping and preparing for a new approach that really precisely focuses on where the violence is. And as the commissioner will tell you, that is some particular neighborhoods, even in some cases, particular blocks within neighborhoods. But also getting more and more officers out to the neighborhoods where they're needed. And that redeployment has been happening over the last few weeks. So sometimes when you layer crisis upon crisis upon crisis, it takes some time to regroup and formulate a new strategy, but that's exactly what the NYPD has been doing, and you're going to see the evidence of that starting this week and beyond. Commissioner.
Yeah, Gloria, I've spoken to a lot of these issues already. I think there's a lot of factors behind it. In some circumstances, I'm not as concerned. But to be truthful, then in some circumstances, I am concerned. What the New Yorkers need to know is that from myself down, from the executive staff to precinct commanders to borough commanders, to the men and women, detectives and police officers, and all the civilian members, we are committed to keeping New Yorkers safe. We have a lot of work to do in this environment. We have to be smart about it, strategic about it. We're going to need a lot of help. We're going to need help from everyone that I've mentioned before: community members, elected officials, lawmakers, to include prosecutors. But we can get this under control. I truly believe we can, but we're going to need a lot of things to go right. We need to get to a place where we police this city fairly, effectively, and we get dangerous people off the street as quickly as possible. We need consequences. I think those are lacking. I've spoken ad nauseum. I've been criticized for speaking about it over the last 6 months, but we can get it going right. But Gloria, I would point out too that just take a look at some of the work I mentioned. 13 arrests just since Monday on shootings and homicides. Our detectives are out there. Patrol making an arrest last night, running towards the danger, towards somebody, a violent person that should not be on the street. Multiple open cases already. Shooting somebody last night, running towards it and recovering the gun and getting them off the street. So the police officers and detectives are out there. They're out there for New Yorkers, and that's what I want people to know.
Go ahead, Gloria.
Thank you. If I could follow up, it looks like if we take gun arrests alone, 67% decrease. Mr. Commissioner, it sounds like you are saying that it's not just a question of the arrest, but what happens after an arrest is made. So are you saying that there's a problem here with how the law is being applied? And if the mayor could speak to that as well, is there a disagreement here between what the law is and how bail is being applied? Can you just speak to that? It seems like.
Gloria, look, I think it's more foundational than that, and I've said it a bunch of times. So again, I'm going to challenge, with great respect to my colleagues in the media, I'm going to challenge you to actually report what I said. Listen, the court system is not functioning. You can't have the ability to get people off the streets if the court system's not functioning. And again, I do feel for everyone in the court system that they're dealing with real challenges, and we want everyone to be healthy and safe. But could we be real and honest about this? We are asking our police officers to go out there and do their normal work, but without the other pieces of the equation working. So I respect our prosecutors deeply, but I am pleading with all of them to focus on gun prosecutions and move gun prosecutions more aggressively and effectively, working with the NYPD. And I'm pleading with the State Office of Court Administration to reopen the court system fully. If you then combine the work you just heard from the commissioner, our officers running towards danger, arrest someone with a gun, now there's a prosecution, there's an outcome, those who need to be in prison are in prison. That's what we need to get functioning again to protect our communities. And the last thing before turning to the commissioner, what I've said to a lot of you, I'm going to say it again. The day Bill Bratton said this to me years ago was an eye-opener for me. A city of 8.6 million people, it is a few thousand who are creating most of the gun violence. Obviously, overwhelmingly, gang and crew members. A very, very small number of people who do not represent the communities that are all trying to live in peace. But we need those individuals to be prosecuted and there to be proper consequences, and obviously that is not happening now. Commissioner.
Yeah, Gloria, I'll try to be brief. I've been accused of talking too long, but I'm very passionate on this issue. We have 2,000 open gun cases right now, just from this year and last year, and more prior. Half of them are indicted already. Probably the other half would be indicted if there was the ability to get an indictment this year. That's a significant core group of individuals that terrorize New Yorkers and carry illegal firearms on the streets of this city. The arrest is almost irrelevant. What happens to the prosecution? And members of the NYPD work, I couldn't tell you how close they work together with our partners in the different district attorneys' offices in Southern and Eastern District to try to get the most out of these. But we need New Yorkers' help too. When you get that grand jury subpoena, when it finally comes in the mail, we need you to participate in the system. We need you to tell your elected officials that you demand that people that carry guns on the streets are prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Everyone has a shared responsibility in this. And Gloria, there's a lot of pieces to this, but a significant piece is exactly what the mayor just said. You know, there's other laws. We can debate that till the cows come home again. But right now, with this environment with COVID, I think people should be standing up on the highest step and saying, I demand to have safety. I demand to have an operating court system. My children's lives are at stake. We can't have a system. Public safety is at risk here where the courts are not fully operating. This is 2020, and we should have better.
Amen. Go ahead.
Next, we have Ruvain from Hamodia.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Commissioner. It's nice to see you again. I wanted to ask you, Mr. Mayor, a couple of days ago, several of your police officers were attacked, including your chief of department. For the first 24 hours, you did not issue a public statement or a tweet. It was only 24 hours after the attack when a reporter asked you about it that you condemned the attack. During that time, you found time to make 11 tweets about police reform. So why did you not respond within 24 hours publicly, and how should that be interpreted by all New Yorkers, from cops to criminals?
Ruben, look, again, your questions always have a particular bias to them. God bless you. But let's be clear about the facts. Over the weekend, we saw something like this, and I condemned it. We don't accept any attacks on police officers. I've said it so many times, and I mean it. And I want everyone to understand that. It's just literally unacceptable in a free society. You cannot attack the people who serve and protect us. Said it many, many times in many circumstances. If you'd like a long list, we'll get you one, Ruben. Sometimes, I'll be the first to say, we should overemphasize that message. I'm perfectly comfortable saying we should have, and again, I work with a big team here, we were doing a lot of different things, we should have put that message out sooner. But anyone who's been listening knows I say it constantly, and I want to get to the day where I don't have to say it because people respect our police officers and don't ever even think of attacking them. And what I'm trying to build is a city where there's mutual respect between police and community. So that we change the environment for the better. I have seen real progress with neighborhood policing. I'm not going to let anything about this multiple crisis of the coronavirus, the worst healthcare crisis in this century, the worst economic crisis in 90 years, a social justice crisis, a disparity crisis, an employment crisis, a fiscal crisis. This is all happening simultaneously. It's never happened before in the city's history. I'm not going to let that make it impossible for me to see that for 6 full years we implemented neighborhood policing and moved the city forward, and we will continue that work and resume that work no matter what. And that's the way forward. Go ahead, Ravin.
My next question is for the commissioner. Mr. Commissioner, Chief Monahan and other leadership has repeatedly said that there's low morale in the police department. I'd like to ask if you agree with that, and if yes, what's the cause, and what can be done to improve that? And
Yeah.
the mayor can answer that as well. Thank you.
Yep. I think Terry Monahan has his pulse on the cops that work for him. It's a tough time right now. I think everyone, you don't need to be in the police department to understand that. Open the papers any day. I mean, it's a tough time to be in law enforcement right now. I don't think this is just about this city, it's about the country. I think it's imperative on all New Yorkers, all people in leadership positions to recognize this, to work together to fix it. And that's certainly what I'm committed to doing.
Yeah, and Ruben, tell the stories of the people who work with the police and the police who work with them. I understand that it's very tempting to just report the bad or just report the controversial, but I beseech you all for the good of New York City. Tell the stories, the everyday stories, the thousands upon thousands of stories every day where police officers show respect for community members show respect for police officers, people thank each other, people work together, people fight crime together. I see that every single time when I go out in communities and talk to real people. So yeah, I think there are real challenges here, and I understand a lot of our officers are going through a lot right now. We gotta support them. And I believe fundamentally that the reforms we are doing will bring us to that point of greater trust and mutual respect. And that's when I think everyone's morale goes up.
Last two for today. Next we have Julia from the Post.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Police Commissioner. Mr. Mayor, could I ask a quick kind of public service question before my two questions?
I think you get 2 questions, my friend, so you decide how you want to use them.
Okay, I'll field that one to your press office. I'm wondering if you and the commissioner could put some meat on the bones of this new anti-crime prevention strategy. For example, how many officers will be shifted to these high crimes areas? What exactly will they be doing? Is it just the foot patrol that their presence will be deterring crime? Can you just flesh it out a little bit? There weren't many details in the press release either.
Appreciate the question, Julia. I'll start, and the commissioner will obviously be able to give you much more, but I think the point is, again, so the time I have spent in ComStat sessions has taught me what I never would have known as a layman, how specific the reality is, how much the NYPD understands exactly where to pinpoint. Again, a lot of times it's not a whole neighborhood. It's a very small section of a neighborhood, and it's very specific individuals. And I think the constant refining of that effort is part of this, and then getting many more cops to be present in those areas as a deterrent, and then the close working connection with the community to show the community support, and also just the deterrence of efforts like Occupy the Corners. So all of these things come together, but in terms of the number of officers and locations, the commissioner will give you more.
Yeah, and let me start, Julia, nice try with the question, with the third question there, but I recently appointed Chief Jeff Madry to be the Chief of Community Affairs. And one of the things I said to him, and it ties to this, is, you know, you're the Chief of Community Affairs, but I think that's a misnomer. I consider all 35,000 cops to be community affairs. And when we get to that point, that's where exactly we should be. It's not the men and women that work for Jeff Madry to work with the community, it's all cops. And the second point of that is the exact same answer for anti-crime. There's not a small segment of cops that quote unquote anti-crime. They do phenomenal work, they're historic. But all police officers fight crime. Whether you're in uniform, whether you're in plain clothes, whether you're working inside analyzing crime, or whether you're on a foot post. We are all committed to exactly what we're doing here, and that's keeping New Yorkers safe. Hundreds and hundreds of officers are being redeployed from inside positions, from outside positions, but just what we do every day in ComStat. You know, certain crime categories are down right now. We can afford the ability to shift those resources. So these are detectives and police officers that are already out on the street, but just being shifted to incredibly specific areas. The intelligence is there. We know it. We know what the problems are. We know what our obstacles are in terms of courts and getting people to cooperate in investigations. And we know exactly where to put the cops. And it's not a neighborhood. It is 2 square blocks in an area. And believe me, the people that live on those blocks know all too well because they hear the gunshots. So we are on it. We are deploying to stop it. And we are working incredibly close with our partners. Believe me, the prosecutors are sick of seeing my face and Terry Monahan's face. And when the phone rings and they, we are all in this together. We're going to be pulling the community more into this. We're going to be pulling the community more into this with Jeff Madry, and not just Jeff Madry, all precinct commanders, and sitting down with the community, with their cops, with their detectives, and having detectives stand up and saying, this is what I'm investigating in your community. This is what I need help in. Who can tell us about this? So it's good. Listen, we're going to get out of this, and we are going to put a stop to this violence. It's going to be incredibly difficult with all. When you don't have an operating court system, I hate to be a broken record, we got to be incredibly, it's taken an incredible amount of resources to put it in areas where this violence is happening. And then, let me just say this too. We pioneered precision policing. We've driven arrests down in this city by concentrating on people that unfortunately are willing to carry a gun, pull it out and use it. And we've done a number of takedowns. When those courts are opened up, we have a line of cases ready to get the most violent people off the streets. We need the courts open.
Amen. Go ahead, Julia.
Okay, on the courts, actually, this question comes from my colleague, Craig McCarthy in the Shack. 20 of the people who were arrested or wanted for shootings in June, actually only one had an open case per these own numbers. So you're saying that the court slowdown has led to shootings, but a lot of these folks don't actually have open cases.
I have to see exactly what you're referring to last night. Here's what I'm referring to. I think we've demonstrated. I think you've sat at the press conferences with me, with Bob Boyce before me, with Mike LaPetri, with Terry Monahan, with Rodney Harrison, and on and on. We are seeing a significant uptick in gang violence. We know exactly who's involved. If you were sitting in that CompStat meeting last night, you would hear the frustration of some of the command level officers in terms of, again, everything I've said. And we are ready to take violent people off the street. We need help. That's point A. That's nothing to do with what you just said. Last night in Manhattan, we made an arrest of a person shooting somebody. That person has 2 open cases, a robbery at knife point, a grand larceny, a third one that's not open, arrested recently, drugs and dice, and the usual story. I don't know the exact examples of what you're referring to, but please, you cannot ignore the fact of what the prison and jail populations were, what they are now, and then combine that with no one is going in large scale because there is no ability to indict people right now. There is an incredible downward pressure because of a lot of factors that we've said ad nauseum to keep people out of jail.
And I just want to add to that really quick, Julia. I mean, imagine the frustration of community residents, and I talk to community residents all the time. They know exactly who is doing the violence. The NYPD knows who's doing the violence. That everyone wants to not be victimized by a very, very few individuals who are creating harm for everyone else. I mean, we lost a 1-year-old, for God's sakes, to people who unfortunately are involved regularly in violence. And this can be stopped, but all of the prosecutors need to play their role, and the commissioner mentioned we're working very closely with the federal government as well, the Eastern District, Southern District. We need all prosecutors to play their role, bring those indictments. We need the court system to function. We need to start moving this again. And look, this is a city that is coming back in so many ways. everyone needs to participate. Do it safely, do it with health, health as the first consideration, but we also have to protect people's lives out in our communities. If we get the prosecutions to start again, we get the court system up to full speed, we can break the back of this violence.
Last one for today, we have Henry from Pix 11.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Want to shift gears with this last question to the ongoing conversation about schools. We've been speaking with a number of teachers worried they don't have enough of a seat at the table. We know you've been speaking with the union, but teachers worried their voices aren't being heard quite enough. Are you concerned about you're going to see a strike in the extreme, but at least one where a lot of educators are saying, listen, I'm not going to do anything but online, your in-person plans be damned. Are you concerned about that?
First of all, it's a great question, Henry. I appreciate it because we want people to have confidence. We want teachers, educators, staff, parents, kids, everyone to know that the focus is on bringing back schools in a healthy, safe manner. We've got 2 months to show people over and over again how that's going to be done. And it's going to be done based on the data. And if at any point the data tells us we need to change direction, we will. But we've been working incessantly with the two main unions of educators and the unions who represent staff. But we welcome more and more educators into that discussion. I'll have that conversation with the chancellor. We certainly want to hear the voices of grassroots educators, their concerns, answer their concerns, or if they're raising new things we need to address, we want that. Some folks are concerned because they have pre-existing medical conditions. Those folks will get an exemption, obviously. We know there'll be a certain number of our educators who will not be able for health reasons to be in school, and those educators will be devoted to our remote learning. But Henry, there's a lot of educators who want to come back deeply. I've talked to a lot of them. I've been out in communities. A lot of teachers will come up to me and say that they are a teacher and they want to talk to me about it. And I constantly say, do you want to go back or not? And I have not met a teacher yet who doesn't want to go back because they're devoted to the kids. And they know the kids just can't get as good an education remotely. But yes, we want to hear those voices and we want to really be respectful of their concerns. And I think you're going to see the vast majority who are healthy will want to be at their post because they want to help our kids move forward. Go ahead, Henry.
Drilling down into kind of a tangential issue to one that you mentioned, I know you figured out the medical exemption form this week. I've seen how teachers can go online and fill that out. What sort of processes are being discussed for educators that aren't vulnerable themselves, but have a vulnerable person in their home, such as an infant child or a diabetic spouse? Or what sort of workarounds are you doing for those tangential people in educators' lives?
We want to know, in those cases, the specifics and want to be respectful, but it's all case by case. But look, everyone's devoted to health and safety. It was painful to shut down the schools, but I said at the time when we did it that I didn't think we'd be able to come back this last school year. I was very adamant as we went along it was not the right time to do it. Now, because the city of New York has been so successful in fighting back this disease, I'm hopeful that in 2 months, with a lot of hard work and a constant obsession with health and safety, we will be ready. But any individual who's got a specific problem, they need to bring it to the attention of their supervisors at DOE, and we want to look at that because we want to make sure they and their families are healthy. We also have an obligation, and remember, Henry, we're dealing with something very unusual here. Rarely in life do you get to hear the voices of so many everyday people. We had 400,000 parents who responded to our survey, and 75%, overwhelming majority, said, we want our kids back in school. And I work for those parents. I work for them. I have to respect their needs and concerns, and their kids need an education. And no one is pretending that remote learning is as good as what happens in the classroom. So we're going to work really hard to get this right, but anyone who has an exceptional situation, we really want to hear that and we want to work with them. Well, everyone, as we close, let's just talk about this day as we get ready for Monday. So Monday, phase 4, what a striking reality. After everything we went through again in March and April, all the pain, all the challenges, all the loss, the fact that we are now looking at the 4th phase of 4, and it will start on time. And yes, there are some pieces that won't be ready, but the fact that there are also pieces that will move forward is a testament to what all of you have done. And a lot of times, I talk to people from around the country, a lot of whom are going through really hell right now. And they ask what was different here, why we were able to come back, and I always say it's because of the people. It's because of New Yorkers. It's because of your strength and your resiliency. It's because of your commitment. You know, a lot of people thought, how could this place, this crowded, energetic place, possibly do shelter in place or social distancing or face coverings? Well, you proved to the world it could be done the right way. And that's why we are now on the verge of phase 4. So anytime anyone suggests doubt, I always say to anyone who has a lot of doubt about this place, you obviously don't know New Yorkers. You obviously don't know the power and the passion of New Yorkers, and you don't know what New Yorkers are capable about if you doubt capable of if you doubt New York City. If you really know New Yorkers, then you have faith in this place and our future. And I want to thank everyone for your hard work, and let's go on now to phase 4. Thanks, everybody.